Welcome back to the last daily rundown of the week. Thank you for watching Channel 7. I'm Dan Morfitt, and with me are guests Wendy Olsen and Rob Mitchell. Now, two leading health organisations have said that drug use should be decriminalised as the war on drugs continues to fail. The Royal Society for Public Health, that's the RSPH, and the Faculty of Public Health still support criminal charges for people who deal drugs, but say that users should be instead referred for treatment and help. The report calls for drug education for young people in schools as part of personal, social health and economic education. It also said that responsibility for a drug strategy should be moved from the Home Office to the Department of Health. So do we think this is progressive or maybe too lenient? Rob, what do you think of this? You're a school teacher.
Yeah, and as a teacher you do see that kind of the effects of drugs, particularly with parents as such using the effect it has on children. And I certainly think if somebody's living a life where they're, because of their drug use, that they're struggling to function, to look after the family, to work, then they need help. Prosecuting them or putting them in jail isn't going to help them. That's been proven. It doesn't stop it. And by doing that, there's no help to the family or to the children. They need help. They need support rather than just turning them into a criminal, which causes more problems.
So on that, when people say that drugs wreck home lives and families, it's not necessarily just the health consequences of taking drugs, but it is the legal problems, the police getting involved, social services. Yeah. That's the main problem,
Yeah, there's a massive problem, and then it's everything that's surrounded with the stigma. The children coming to school, and you hear the stories, and they know people, kind of know what's going on, and it affects them. It affects their performance in school as well, because everything's tied up. It's not just about the drugs. Yeah, there's the police involved, and parents going missing and being taken away. So it isn't just drugs and what they do on drugs. It's the cost, it's the money as well. That they're spending on it rather than the family, the home life. And it's a huge problem, and it's not one that can just be solved by saying, throw them in jail.
And there's a cost there as well to us, the taxpayer, the rest of us, because the amount of social services and police and other services that do get involved. Surely if you get to the problem quicker and treat them as human beings and treat them for a problem, rather than thinking they're the problem themselves.
Well, I was reading today that drug arrest, it costs £335 million a year. Now that money can surely be invested somewhere else to prevent it, in schools, for example, paying for proper education for pupils to teach them about drugs, and not just teachers talking about something that they may or may not know about, but actually having people coming in, giving real life examples of what's happened, what they've been through, what really happens, what are the effects. You can be told different things, but actually have someone to come in and properly educate pupils. That's it.
Yeah, I would even go further, because what the reports are saying today is we shouldn't penalise those who use drugs. So we legalise the use but not the dealing. But you could go further and actually legalise the dealing. And by doing that, what happens is you take out the market, in the black market, that's the secret, gun-ridden, nasty, sales market. And
so a legalise and licensing.
You license certain, so like say cannabis. I think in Colorado, you can only sell cannabis to a user if you're a licensed seller. So by doing that, it cuts out the market in illegal cannabis, which makes people safer. So that when you license it, you know what's being sold.
And almost half of American states now, of the 50, are legalised cannabis.
Well, I think they're depenalised. In that sense, it's decriminalised.
It's mainly used for medicine, but it's worked.
Yeah, and I hear accusations against it that some of that's being sold onward into other states, but that's illegal. So, that's dealing.
And there's laws that are against
There's
that.
laws that restrict it. So what they're trying to do is appreciate that people can make the right choices. Now, in the short term, a child of 13 might not make the right choice, and they might try the drug, but hopefully through groups, through peer pressure, through appreciating there's other ways to have fun, which is really important, people can make the right choices.
And this recommendation seems to be, to me, a no-brainer, moving it from a Home Office, a judicial crime, to something within the Department of Health. And maybe even going further, the Department of Education.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when you see it in terms of party politics, it gets a little bit more problematic.
But isn't that a
the
problem?
journalists are really open about that. That on the right, on the Conservative Party side, they don't want to be seen to be, light on this. They want to have somebody to be basically putting in prison. A huge percentage of the population goes into prison.
But this war on drugs has never really worked, has it?
No, it's never worked. But they want that as their reputation. They want to be hard. They want to be manly. They want to be aggressive against criminals. And I think there's a ratcheting up of aggression sometimes, whereas when they then look at what the left are saying or what Greens are saying or feminists, we're saying no, we should be gentle with people. We need a more gentle society where people feel welcome and they feel that there's help available, but they may not think they have a problem, so they may not want help. But certainly if you're damaging your children, then that has to be looked at, and then the children need help, and then people will get involved. So there should be funding for that. But that's social services.
Definitely, and one of the main social services. Rob, you're a school teacher, you're a moulder of minds.
Yeah.
One of the big things about drugs is if you decriminalise it, you take away that edge, that tag of, I don't want to say coolness, but you take away that essence of illegality. Many people see drugs, especially in their teenage years, as a rite of passage. Not necessarily that they then become full-on users and then abusers. If you decriminalise something, it surely takes away the allure.
I think it does, but I also think you've got to be careful because if it's been decriminalised, then I think a lot of young people, teenagers, will think, oh, it's all right, as long as we're sensible with it, And I think it might even encourage more to take it. It was like a few years ago.
But Rob, do you not think they're already a bit primed to think it's sexy? I mean, I think it was good the way you put it. They think it's sexy because it's like teen rebellion against authority.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And after 3 or 4 years, if it was legal to use them, I think it might be less sexy, to be honest.
It's one of those things like alcohol. Everybody likes to have a first drink way before the legal age of 18. It's a peculiarly British thing, because if you go to America, they've got the age of 21 where they can't drink before then. They often do, but there's different caveats.
But what do you think about it, though, as a teacher? Do you think that it's just sexy because it is illegal?
Well, I think it's everything as a teenager. You want to push boundaries, you want to try things, you want to do things that are naughty. If it's smoking or drinking, there is always something. That's part of growing up, isn't it?
Yeah. Skateboarding in the car parks where you're not supposed to be.
Pushing it, you're not
arguing with the guards.
I don't. Well, again, I think it's absolutely right what you're saying, but I think it's got to tie in with real education. For children, for pupils, for teenagers.
It's quite a good kind of education if you get people talking in groups about what is harmful and what is antisocial, and they're working it out for themselves. I think they'll remember that more.
But I think they need some, if I've done lessons before in class, when you have your scheme of work and you say, drugs will lead to this or that. But to actually have someone to come in who's experienced it, who's been through it, who's had their life turned upside down, who's lost their family members or something because of drugs. To actually have someone come in, pupils respond a lot more. They have a lot more respect for people who come in off the street and have experienced something than Mr. Mitchell or someone stood up there kind of preaching. As right as I might be what I'm saying. What do I know? I don't really know anything.
It's that anecdotal evidence that people take, looking at some hard facts. Over 1/3 of all adults, so that's 16 to 59-year-olds in a Home Office survey, almost, over a third, almost 35% of all adults have taken drugs. So this war on drugs, this relentless campaigning, almost devilment and making it an evil in society hasn't really worked.
No, and everywhere you look, music and rock and roll and all this, it's all hand in hand with that. It's cool, isn't it? This is what it's all about. So teenagers, young adults are going to.
And the weird thing is,
quite interesting. In Portugal, they did decriminalise it, and they just said no, we're not going to keep putting people in jail for this. And they had, sort of for a couple of years, it was still going up. The use was going up, and then it came down. And so, all predictions from the right wing would have been that you'd have, this expansion of use, and there would be, a terrible crisis of drug use, and there isn't. Portugal's fine. They're just
politicians
fine.
on both sides of the line would say, well, that's Portugal, it's a Mediterranean country, it's small.
things take time, don't
Yeah.
they? Nothing's going to change overnight. But
It's a generational shift that needs to happen more than anything else.
I think it's a little bit. I remember when I was young, when I turned sort of like 18, 19, and I remember going out on a Saturday night and the pubs would shut at 11, the clubs would shut at 2, and that was it. You'd go home, and then going to Europe, going to places like Germany where they'd be open all night, there'd be public transport all night, and it was just a completely different culture. It was fantastic. And then,
very liberal.
Yeah, and people said back here, oh, it wouldn't work. People drinking all night. There'd be a right mess, but they weren't. They just paced themselves, and now pubs are open, a lot longer than they were. And maybe at first people did stay out longer, drinking longer, and getting drunk more and causing problems. But now, it really isn't a problem because we've got used to that culture, the change of culture that the rest of Europe already had. Maybe that will be the same with drugs.
I think ultimately a decriminalisation makes use of drugs something more human, because if you think about the end user. At the moment, we demonise them, we jail them, we take away their children for something that they might not be able to handle, while there's very many examples of people that can take drugs without abuse. It's like alcohol. Some people can have 1 or 2 pints, some people can't, and they're alcoholic. With drug use, it's good to use rehab and education, and if people fall into disarray by the use, overuse or abuse of drugs, to get them clean again, to get them happy, to get them level is possibly more important than putting them in a prison.
I think that's the argument. I think all this research has been looking into how the money is spent. So they're saying if we spend money on rehabilitation and programs of support and making sure people have clean needles and get their health checked and realize the links between, let's say people who shoot up with a needle and other diseases that they can get, if they really work on that, the money's better spent that way rather than putting them in jail. And it isn't the drugs that makes other people unsafe. It's when the drug user gets so addicted that they're stealing, then
and have
others
to
are
go
unsafe.
to criminal activity for other things.
And that is criminal, so then they're doing a crime. But the actual drug use doesn't need to be a crime.
The drugs themselves as well, if they're legalised, if they're controlled how they're manufactured, then they will be safer, because when you hear a lot of people getting ill or even dying, it's quite often not because they've taken drugs, but because they've taken a drug that's contaminated, that's cooked with something or other. And,
or triple strength, that's what's been coming out the last few weeks in Manchester. People think they're buying one thing, but they're getting triple the amount. And then they can't manage. I mean, I just have to say, I'm totally against people using these drugs, whether it's cannabis or something stronger. I am totally, totally opposed to it. But I'm also persuaded of the arguments here. And even prepared to accept what you've said. You're saying, well, it can be safe for some people to do a little bit. You can hold that view. I don't hold that view.
With the drugs debates.
But we don't have to go to the whole jail thing in order for my view to be respected.
We've got so many angles on the drugs debate. We've gone through many of them here, and it's got to possibly be happening in people's homes right now, and it'll happen one day in Parliament. But until then, it's time for another break. The Daily Rundown will be back next, looking at Russian hacking and should we still be sending people into space? All of that coming up in 3 minutes here on Channel 7.